Hi there, Jeff Johnson again. We are live, Nested Knowledge. We are joined today by a special guest. So it's the usual crew: me, Jeff Johnson, Chief Design Officer, and Renita. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Yeah, Renita Tarchand, Director of Implementation and Client Success here at Nested Knowledge.
And we're joined by Keith Kallmes, President of Nested Knowledge. Keith, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hey everyone, I'm a serial entrepreneur in first contract research, then medical device, and now software solution to support contract researchers for med device. So really glad to be with you, Jeff and Renita, and excited to talk about business use cases for nested knowledge in the research world.
I feel like this is worth mentioning because it's a source of confusion for a lot of people. Keith and Kevin Kallmes are brothers, right? So, and they're not the same person. They are also not twins, but they look very similar, and they're easily confused because of all the alliteration going on in their collective names. But yeah, Keith, you're also a co-founder of Nested Knowledge. You're one of the original four. Right. So it's good to have you on the call today. And the reason I wanted to have you on the call today, Keith, is because you're kind of our business development guy. You're kind of in charge of sales, business development, that sort of thing. So you've met with basically all of our clients to date, and you kind of help them meet their particular unmet clinical needs and business needs with our software platform. And that's the topic of our live stream today. And I want to ask you a few questions to get you going. So first of all, just thinking about systematic reviews and meta analyses in general, what's the business case? I think we've talked a lot on these live streams about kind of the academic case, and I think that's pretty well understood actually, as to why you might want to do systematic reviews and meta-analyses. They're kind of at the top of that evidence pyramid in terms of quality. But why do businesses need to do them? First of all, they're expensive. They're time consuming, right? And oftentimes business needs to move quickly. So, but why should businesses turn around and actually care about systematic reviews and meta-analyses?
That's a great question, Jeff. And I will just start by talking a little bit about how the research process works within the business world, within pharma and device, and then I'll actually share my screen and dive into what that process looks like. So I think the best way to illustrate this is a little bit of personal experience, and then I can talk about how that applies to the industry in general. So Ken and I, in our last business, brought a medical device from concept to the marketplace. And at every step, clinical literature, clinical evidence was guiding our decision-making. So when we decided what device to build, that was actually built on a systematic literature review. I still remember it's called Brindjikji et al., showing the clinical efficacy of balloon guide catheters. When we were developing our specs, i.e. what that device was going to look like, we were guided by the clinical literature. Fast forward to later in the business when we were looking at designing a clinical study for regulatory purposes. When we chose the endpoints for that clinical study, that was based around past studies which were published in the clinical literature. When we submitted for regulatory approval, that regulatory document had clinical literature. And finally, when you're looking to get your device into a hospital, supporting documentation, i.e. why should physicians be using this in patients? Well, they're not going to take your word for it. They're going to want clinical literature, which is where the whole market access and health economic evaluations come in. Finally, and last but not least, any communications and any claims, any marketing claims made by you or your company, any communications with have to be based on evidence. You can't just invent things. It's not like in tech where you can be Facebook and make a bunch of statements. You actually have to be utterly fact-based and document that utilizing that clinical literature, that clinical evidence. So I'm actually going to go ahead and share my screen and go through what that looks like. And I'm going to shift from my own personal experience within med device, and I'm going to shift towards pharma, because this is probably where the bulk of clinical evidence management occurs. The pharma market is 3, 4, or 5 times as big as med device, depending on if you're talking about the US or the world, and depending on how expansive your definitions are. But this was put together by Tony Caniglio. He's our pharma whisperer guru, about all of the places within a pharma company or a pharma consultancy you would use a platform like Nested Knowledge or some other clinical evidence library, or you'd be doing analyses based on the clinical literature. So right at the beginning, during phase 2 planning, you're going to rely on clinical literature to pick the endpoints of interest for your clinical study. And you're going to do that either with a novel drug or biologic, and you're going to do that if you're planning to re-indicate an existing drug from your portfolio. And this is critically important to do at this stage, because down the line, when you're looking for regulatory approval, or when you're looking to directly compare this drug to its competitors, if you don't pick the right endpoints for your study based on the clinical literature, you could be jeopardizing your regulatory submission, and you could be jeopardizing your health economic analysis down the line. Moving down the line in terms of regulatory submissions, you're going to need to include clinical literature in those in your justification, right? And when you're meeting with FDA ahead of even submitting anything, that discussion is going to be based on the clinical literature, because it's going to be based on past clinical studies that your competitors or you had to run in the past in order to get regulatory clearance. Moving forward in the process in the product life cycle, when you are positioning your drug and choosing your messaging, you can call this like claims refinement, right? Whenever you're defining your claims, that needs to be based on evidence, and you're going to need to justify to your legal department where that claim is coming from, right? So having a library of clinical evidence where you can go and find that evidence is going to be critical. That brings us to HEOR, Health Economics Outcomes Research and Market Access. And this is something that Renita can probably talk to you better than I can, but this is where you are justifying the pricing, or even coming to a price for your drug, and quantifying the benefit to patients or the system, right? And there are a bunch of bodies that are going to want to see this. This is even relevant after you get regulatory clearance. And ICER if you're in the United States, NICE if you're in Europe, and the HTA body, and also insurers are going to want to see your justification. And that justification is going to be based on a meta-analysis combined with a health economic model, again, based on a published clinical evidence. I'm going to move a little bit faster through those. Those are probably the key aspects where you're going to need a deep and intensive expertise and knowledge of the clinical literature. Moving on to sort of late.
Oh, we may have lost Keith for a moment. Hopefully he...
I can hear you guys.
Oh, just say that last thing one more time, Keith. I think we lost you for a split second there.
Okay, I'm going to start right now at medical affairs. Medical affairs obviously responsible for the publication positioning of their organizations, and having a library of clinical evidence serve as templates or to serve as the basis for ongoing publications is going to be really critical. And then obviously they're going to be often putting out systematic literature reviews and meta-analyses on theirs and competing products. And it's easier to have that all in one place than to have to redo that work every time. And then, like I mentioned, medical information. Anytime you get a question from a practitioner, you can't just send them an unsupported email. Communications with medical professionals have to be based on published clinical evidence. Those are the traditional uses of systematic literature reviews. I think that there's increasingly going to be a move towards using literature for competitive intelligence, so you can keep an eye on what your competitors are doing. And finally, business due diligence, right? The traditional due diligence process, and I've been through, I can tell you, it's all very templatized, and it's all focused on like the legal ramifications of acquiring a company. But I think just as important or more important is going to be doing a technical and scientific diligence on that company's products, and really seeing how they're positioned compared to their competitors, and quantifying the value add of their drug or biologic or device, the wins above replacement in the marketplace. And the best way to do that is to do a comprehensive literature review and meta-analysis on them and their competitors, and then quantify the value add to patients and the price that the acquiring entity could justify. So that's a lot of information. This is a super information dense slide, but I hope I'm getting across the entity-wide value, or the organizational-wide value of maintaining an up-to-date body of this evidence that everyone within this organization can access.
Absolutely. I think you're even hitting on some interesting things that I want to delve a little bit more into at the end of this slide. You're saying basically that the value of systematic reviews, of incorporating evidence of this high a quality that is this broad reaching, can be valuable kind of in other ways that we wouldn't traditionally think about, especially as kind of newer, better tools like nested knowledge come onto the marketplace that allow you to complete these things more cheaply, more quickly, and more accurately, all at the same time.
Absolutely.
Right. So, but that leads into my next question, right? So what specifically about nested knowledge then it helps with this process? How does nested knowledge help facilitate not just how to do a systematic review, facilitate meta-analysis and that sort of thing, but how does it facilitate some of these other things like communication, like providing insights and data across your entire company as a whole, whether it's a small company or a very large company, that sort of thing?
That's a great question, Jeff, and I'll get into the technical details of why nested knowledge would be good for solving that problem. But I'll start with something sort of half true, half tongue in cheek. If you're a BD guy like me, trolling through an Excel spreadsheet and reading a 16-page PDF that details every publication on your therapy of interest is going to make my eyes glaze over. I really don't know how researchers can do it. So I think the biggest value add up front of nested knowledge is that everything is put into interactive web-based visuals. It's super accessible, and it really expands the potential user base, or the potential for accessing that information. Essentially, people that aren't subject matter experts can very quickly get a quantitative understanding of what the evidence says, and I'll kind of just jump into what that looks like, right? So if you go to our website, you can see examples, but these dashboards are really a huge value add to the non-traditional use cases, like the business development use case. You come in, you can get in just a couple seconds an idea of how many studies are out there, what sorts of data elements they report, what quantitatively is the evidence underlying them being better than their competitors across X, Y, and Z outcomes, right? So in a traditional systematic review meta-analysis, that's not possible, right? The sort of expanded audience is going to have their eyes glazed over before they get to an answer. But having all that information in a user-friendly dashboard is going to, in and of itself, expand the uses beyond just the traditional researchers. So that's the on the output side. On the input side, nested knowledge is really a differentiator because it's a living library that allows for much better cross-functional use. I mentioned my background as both a vendor and a med device person myself. The traditional model in these sorts of organizations is to have isolated departmental specific reviews. And that's because they have all their own forms. They each have their own preferred vendor, and the communication just isn't there. So that leads to a tremendous amount of duplicative effort and a delay in the product being able to get to market. So with Nested Knowledge, our vision is to build a library that will always have at least the beginnings of a review, at least the infrastructure for a review that can be used later in the process. And really the reason underlying this is that the clinical evidence that underlies your common data elements for selecting a trial endpoint is going to be identical to the studies that are going to be, for instance, in your CER for, the EU MDR submission, or the dossier that you submit to an insurer to get reimbursed, or the PDFs you get text excerpts from to support a claim or to communicate with a physician. So eliminate that duplicative work, have it in a library, and then put it in a dashboard so you can capture those diverse stakeholders and very quickly and effectively communicate complex topics to them. And also, the last thing I'll throw in, which is kind of my favorite part of it, is Nested Knowledge on the outputs is almost like a choose your own adventure. Like, find your own data, run your own analyses. Don't take the author's word for it.
I like that a lot. I like that way of putting it. So this kind of this wheel diagram explains, like, first of all, here's the current paradigm, right? Current paradigm is, and this gets more and more complicated. Obviously, the larger your organization is, the more departments you have that have to talk to one another or fail to talk to one another. Each of those departments is kind of fed by an external vendor right now. And it's not that Nested Knowledge eliminates necessarily those external vendors. And oftentimes, many of our clients are external vendors themselves. But what it does is it pulls all that data in-house in many other ways. And it allows each of those different departments to now talk to one another more effectively. Is that a fair summary of what's going on here, Keith?
Exactly. 90-ish% of this stuff is outsourced in pharma. And I honestly think that's great, because it kind of concentrates that expertise in agencies that simply do it over and over and over again. So there's really no drawback in engaging with the vendor. In fact, it could be even better, right? Because that's what they do all day, every day, is these reviews or these, analyses. So I don't think it's a bad thing at all that work is concentrated in vendors, and I actually think it presents an opportunity. The beauty of Nested Knowledge is, however, we can engage with both or either, right? So each individual pharma or drug or device company could have a subscription and then invite their vendors to collaborate with them, or the vendors can complete their projects in Nested Knowledge and then share that with their clients eventually. So there's like a genuine two-sided approach to it that also just another value add for Nested Knowledge, like the collaboration, right? Collaborating in the cloud is better than emailing around an Excel spreadsheet, and that just makes working with a vendor easier, or working with your client easier.
Right. Not least of which, because an Excel spreadsheet can fall out of date so quickly, and is not something that, when you've got a project that's going on for years and years and years, you want something that is updatable, and you want something with just comprehensive, unprecedented access to the underlying data that's being updated in real time all the time, right? I want to pull Renita into this conversation, because so Keith, I think, has outlined a really good kind of reason to use this software platform that we've created together. But Renita, why? Obviously, there's going to be some overhead, right? So why should a company adopt Nested Knowledge? Oftentimes there are kind of ways to do this. Sometimes they're manual. Obviously, we have competitors in the space, but why use Nested Knowledge? And what are some of those hurdles that you might have to overcome? And how can our team here at Nested Knowledge help your company overcome those hurdles and really make use of this software as fully as we're talking about today?
Great question, Jeff. And I think this is a question that's on the mind of a lot of our clients, right? Like maybe you're not 100% happy with the current process that you're engaging in. Maybe you're using, 3 to 6 different softwares just to complete this process. And, it's taking months and months and a large amount of employees to actually complete it. And you start to think to yourself, okay, there has to be a better way to do this that is, doesn't require all these different softwares and doesn't require, people emailing around and kind of collaborating with each other outside of those softwares and kind of looking at each other's work and reviewing and all of that sort of thing and trying to build something that requires a lot of people, but almost everyone is doing it largely on an individual basis. And so when people come to us and say, we're interested in the solution and this seems to be something that could really solve that problem, one, because of that workflow that's integrated allows for multiple people to work within it. And also because, as you work within that workflow, the visuals are automatically built for you. So, a lot of those tools make the updatability really easy, as well as the ability to update that search and run it on a schedule, of course. But when we get these requests that, we want to think about using the software, we at Nested Knowledge are happy to provide you with a pilot period to see, like, is this the right tool for your team? Because I think that's so important, right? You want to make sure that the people that are going to be using this day to day for their jobs, you want to make sure that this is something that they like and that this is something that they can use and understand. And of course, with any software, it is hard to learn a software and to learn how to work within it and to do it correctly. But it's not impossible, especially with the help of our support and implementation team. And so usually what we'll do is if somebody wants to purchase a large license, like an enterprise license, we'll allow them a pilot period. They can build a project in the software and they can, try it out, see how their team interacts with the software, if they like it. And of course, we will provide them with assistance and support during that time. And then as they approach full licensure, we're happy to provide you with onboarding sessions, group training sessions, an onboarding process that's tailored to your team so that everyone feels supported and everyone feels that they are, that they can use this in the correct way to complete their work. And sorry, Jeff, I forgot the second part of your question. Did I cover everything?
No,
there?
you've covered a ton. You've covered a lot. So maybe sometimes people wonder about, okay, so what do I get at each different level of licensure tier? And certainly you're right. You can sign up for Nested Knowledge right now, today. You can go try it out as an individual contributor. You can bring your whole team in to work on a project together for free. Just try it out, nested-knowledge.com. You can sign up right there and start using it with full access to all of the features. As you start to think about integrating this into your organization and your entire workflow as a whole, though, you should be aware of some of those things that we can help you kind of to do, not least of which is the team that you head up, Renita, the support and onboarding and integration team. The other thing that I want to point out too is that especially if you we always listen to all development requests. So when someone submits a feature idea to us, we're always going to be interested in designing that and helping our customers and our users, even if they're just our free kind of tier users. If it's a good idea, we're going to try to develop it. We're going to try to find the time to develop it. But if you're subscribing at our highest tier, we're going to lend some precedence to your development request. And if it's something that we can do, we're going to try to knock it out quickly and get you the feature you need in order to solve that unmet critical need that you're working towards, or whatever the case may be. And we've had some really interesting kind of development requests especially in the last couple of months. We've seen kind of a recent uptick in the number of users who are coming in from really diverse, very, very interesting organizations, some of which are kind of nonprofit, some are corporate, etc. Without sharing names, obviously, without sharing project details, Renita, can you share a couple of interesting examples, just different, maybe even some technical challenges that our team has helped other businesses to overcome in the past few months or so?
Yeah, of course. So this is like the excitement, and I think the beauty of having Nested Knowledge on your side is our development team is very involved and is very excited to kind of take requests from our licensed user to make sure that their process, they feel that, okay, we've left a workflow maybe that we've been using for years, and we want to make sure that we can fully integrate all of those processes in the nested knowledge software. We want to make sure we can still do all those functions with the workflow that we were previously using. And so we had a client come to us and say, well, we're trying to build a very, very big review. It involves the import of thousands, hundreds of thousands of articles, but I'm having a little bit of an issue with the search. When I try to run that search, it is crashing software and it's not going through. And our development team was able to get back to them right away and say, well, okay, I understand what the problem here is. It's actually hitting our limit, and we didn't think anybody would build a review with over 100,000 articles, and we built that limit kind of to say, okay, well, no one is really going to be importing and screening 100,000 articles and going through that process. So, we put that limit in to kind of break down that barrier. And once we heard that request, we said, well, okay, we'll just lift the limit or we'll expand it so that, that can be integrated within your workflow, because, it was a request from a client. They needed to use it for their work, and we were happy to do it. It was something we definitely could sit and brainstorm about and make sure that it could get in the software by within a reasonable time for them. So a lot of those kind of requests, we're happy to accommodate, especially for licensed users. If you're somebody that's considering piloting, please feel free to let us know. Like, if you find something that's not in the software currently, we love ideas and suggestions. We also have a page available called Nulled, where you can put in any suggestions that you can find or think about in the software, and our development team lives on there and loves to look at any requests that you might have to share with us. So that's another way that we do support clients, not only with the onboarding process and making sure that they can use every function of the software, but also through technical requests and building features for individuals that need them to complete their work.
Yes, we take great pride and we often say that our software was developed based upon the advice of experts. We've worked very closely with a variety of different organizations who are working in this field day in, day out, in order to deliver the right feature set, right? The features that people need. And we're still adding features every week, every month. I think roughly, Carl, will push another update, and it often includes something big, something major. We're still working on, right now we're still working on dual extraction, but it's close, right? And that's something that came down from our professional partners who are giving us this advice as to what we should build, and we take your advice seriously. So if you have ideas, you can go to our support page on our website, about.nested-knowledge.com/support, and you can enter your development request right there. And usually our development team, they tend to stay up late. They're up at odd hours, so they will probably get back to you, even if it's the middle of the night, with some sort of status on whether or not we're building that feature right now, or whether or not we can kind of consider that, take that feature into consideration and think about it for the future. But yeah, certainly, if you come into our software and you don't see the feature you want, we want to hear about it. We want to know, because we probably want to build that feature. Okay, we are really close to kind of the half hour that I had planned here. I want to throw it back to Keith just briefly. Keith, is there anything that you want to add to that last bit of the conversation? So my question was, how can we at Nested Knowledge help the pharmaceutical and device startups, whether they're startups or very mature organizations? How can we help integrate Nested Knowledge and help them kind of move their evidence paradigm into the future, past PDFs and towards this living review paradigm that we envision?
Every physical library starts with one book, so do a pilot project, and that's how all of our clients who've been successful is that you have big vision and you small action, right? Eventually we could have everything in this living, interactive, web-based visual library. but you need to start with one project. So do a pilot project, reach out. If your client, Renita, will help you with that first project, get it underway. And the beauty of working with Renita on the NK platform is simply by doing it in the platform, you're going to learn systematic review best practices, and you're going to set yourself up for getting away from that just one review and then building the whole library. But it starts small, just like everything. I think it was Cicero, right? The beginnings of all things are small. So as is with your living reviews.
Great answer. Great answer. All right, we'll call it there. It was a great half hour. Thank you both for joining me, and we'll be back here next week.
Thanks, Jeff.
All right.
Thank you.